Okay, well, firstly, thank you very much for taking the time to speak with me, and thank you for your fantastic presentation today. I thought it was fascinating. Please can I start by asking you just to briefly summarize what it is that you found out while doing this study?
So first of all, I wanted to thank the ERF for having me at the annual conference, and thanks a lot also for featuring my work in a video. I really appreciate it. So the main objective of the paper that I presented at the conference is to study the different policies that can leverage the process of structural change in developing countries in general and in particular in the MENA region. So I'd like to talk about three main findings. So first of all, with regards to the productivity decomposition that I undertake in order to study the patterns of the structural change, I found that the structural change patterns are very heterogeneous in different sectors and in different countries. And I found that the pace of structural change is very modest relative to the within component in the productivity decomposition. With regards to the policy's impact, I would like to speak about the impact of the structural policies and the impact of the macro policies. So I find that the structural policies like competition, trade, finance, macroeconomic institutions, they are very important for leveraging the process of structural change in developing countries. As per the macro stabilization policies, some main highlights from my findings is that, for example, high policy rates can undermine the process of structural change. Actually, the high policy rates are very prevalent in developing countries in order to curb inflation, but unfortunately they make the cost of capital very high, and this can undermine the process of structural change. And I find also that the business cycle downturns can be useful for structural change. This may sound like a finding doesn't really make sense, but eventually it's very consistent with the literature, because recessions are going to induce the exit of the least productive firms and provides a sort of a silver lining for the difficult times. I also find that the counter-cyclical policies, counter-cyclical fiscal and monetary policies, very useful for the process of structural change, because they make developing countries more resilient to the exogenous shocks. So they can reduce the aggregate volatility, and therefore firms would be able to preserve their most innovative and productive activities.
Okay, brilliant, thank you. So my next question to you is, why are these findings important today? How does your research fit into the broader questions and discussions concerning this topic?
I think that this question is important because unfortunately many developing countries suffer from having a large surplus of labor, especially, and resources in general in the least productive sectors. And the engine that would help moving resources from the least productive sectors to the most productive sectors is known as structural change. There is a sort of an agreement in the literature in general and with development practitioners as well that structural change is very important for developing countries. However, there is little agreement on which policies exactly could leverage this process. So on the one hand, for example, structural policies are known in the literature that they can improve the allocative efficiency. However, they are very difficult to implement and they take time to materialize, so that's why it's difficult to undertake them. On the one hand, macroeconomic policies are usually perceived as exclusively focusing on macroeconomic stability, and the argument that I'm trying to advance in this work is that they can eventually go beyond, these macro policies can eventually go beyond the macro stability objective, and they can actually be concerned with development objectives, including structural change, if they are undertaken in a development friendly way, for example, in a counter-cyclical way.